that health signature that she has will be identified all the way to the fourth generation. So if she has some health challenges at this moment, for example, maybe baby is restricted in terms of growth, that gene will be passed all the way to the fourth generation.
So that's why great-grandchildren.
Exactly, wow. Great-grandchild, yeah. And so that's why it's important to maintain the health of the current woman.
Yeah,
because her health will contribute to more generations of children that come after her.
And what she should be doing differently in terms of her reproductive health.
Exactly. So now it's just not even about reproductive health care. It's also about holistic health.
Oh, wow.
And holistic health is mental health, spiritual health, physical health. And one of the things that plays a very important role, and people really underestimate it, is nutrition.
That is the voice of Professor Moses Madadi, clinician, doctor, and scientist, and professor at the University of Nairobi. Moses is really focusing on women's health and delving into technology in terms of getting cures to be able to address issues around healthy reproductive systems and safety deliveries of healthy babies. Hi, my name is Juliette, and I'm the creator and host of Connecting the Dots podcast. I love ideas and problem solving, and my career in communications has led me down a path of curiosity. Why we do what we do, how we tell better stories, and how African scientists solve everyday problems. Join me on this enlightening and entertaining exploration of African science like you've never experienced before. Get ready to laugh, learn, and be inspired. We've done ample research.
Okay.
We feel you're one of those African science leaders we want to be able to talk to and really unpack why the area of research or path that you've taken.
Yes.
You are a medical doctor and a clinical scientist, and you're also a professor at the University of Nairobi and an associate dean.
Maybe a little bit of my background on how I ended up where I am today. Yeah, so in the village in 80s, I used to see people die, and just hearing someone who's died in the village would really scare me because I really used to fear seeing dead bodies. But then I also wanted to understand what is it that's happening. And that time, HIV/AIDS was taking a huge toll on people. And people would become so thin, and then they would end up dying. And sometimes as students would be taken to those funerals to look at the body, and then they'd be buried. So every time I would always ask myself, what is the cause of all this? What happens here? And so from the primary school level, I said, maybe I want to really participate in trying to get the answers to some of these questions. Very young person that time. And of course, I didn't know anything, no mentorship. So in high school, I continued with that curiosity of how do we then get some of these issues that can be answered to prevent people from dying. You know, that was my real question. So it was a very ambitious kind of questions. So after high school at Moi High School, Kabarak, I managed to get the University of Nairobi on scholarship as a medical student. And this is where I really developed a lot of interest in science and research. But just before then, as I was doing my Form 4, I had the first travel to Nairobi, my first time in Nairobi. And I said, I want to go see how and where medical students learn from. So I landed in Chiromo with one of my relatives who took me to Chiromo. And I saw elegant students in white coats, and they were moving on the corridors. And, I said, wow, this is what I really want to become. And when I saw them, I said, I want to become also a teacher in this department, in this unit.
Yeah.
And I was in high school, no exposure in Nairobi at all. So I worked very hard in my first year, fast forward. And I was one of the top students in the Department of Human Anatomy. And after that, one of the course coordinators at that time, who is my mentor up to today, Professor Ogengo, identified me and a few others to be the instructors of human anatomy. So we became instructors and demonstrators from the time I was in second year, and that's how I started teaching in the Department of Human Anatomy.
You've been really looking at the challenge of why do we end up with low birth weight, babies, stillborns, and it all has to do with the environment, the ecosystem of the woman's reproductive system or the womb. Let's talk a little bit about that. And now I feel like you're about to use some heavy words like microbiomes and microorganisms.
Yes.
Just tell us, what is it you're seeing?
Yes.
What are the challenges? And then also you could delve into how you're using AI.
Sure. Yes. So very interesting area. And someone might ask, you are now studying vaginal environment, you study the placenta, you study the blood vessels supplying the womb, but they're all tied because that environment is the same environment. So it has to be a holistic environment for the baby to be healthy. And so I proposed with my team to work on the vaginal environment, because we know the vaginal environment is so important to ensure the uterine environment is also healthy. And so there are good bacteria that live within the vagina. We call them the microbiome. And they seem to be different from population to population. And these bacteria sometimes are changed in certain disease processes. When they are changed, then they affect that particular environment in the vagina. And this can ascend all the way to the uterus where the baby normally stays. Now, if this is affected, then it means the growth of this baby and the growth of the placenta is not optimum. So the babies can be too small for their age, what we call in biology intrauterine growth restriction, or babies can be born before they reach the age of birth, that we call the preterm birth.
Babies, yeah.
Yes, or the babies can actually die in the womb. When the babies die in the womb, we call it stillbirth. And we suspect that these changes happen because of the changed environment, and that's where our focus of our studies are on trying to just outline what are these infections and how do they affect the biology of that environment of the uterus and the vagina. And then how do they also lead to what we call the adverse pregnancy outcome, too small for gestational age, born before they reach term, or dying in the womb. So we want to answer those questions. And since we'll be generating a lot of data, we want to apply some of the novel technologies that we have learned so far, what we call artificial intelligence, because we know in medicine that's really the future. Applying so we have the human intelligence where our brain works, but then we have the machine intelligence where we train machines to be intelligent. And now that's proving to be one of the very promising tools that we can use in medicine. So we'll apply this big data and now be able to predict which women are at risk of certain infections or which women are at risk of getting certain outcomes of birth, and be able to place some of the interventions early enough before we actually have these outcomes occurring. So we hope from our studies we should be able to change the way we do our antenatal care, and hopefully we have a better and very useful population.
What practical things can women do to maintain good vaginal health? And is there a role for their sexual partners to play? Yeah. Sometimes I think we assume that this is all to the women, but maybe there's a role for their partners to also play.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the vaginal health is very important, as I've mentioned, and the outcomes of it, come to the fourth generation of health.
And why fourth generation? Can you just explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so what happens is that, so you have a man and a woman, they have a relationship, then out of that comes the first generation. So there's a baby that's born, we call it the first generation of babies, okay? Then when that baby grows, becomes a man or becomes a woman, they get a partner, and then they also get another baby, that's second generation, and then third generation and fourth generation. So that's what I mean by generations. And what I mean here is that the health of the mother, that health signature that she has, will be identified all the way to the fourth generation. So if she has some health challenges at this moment, for example, maybe baby is restricted in terms of growth, that gene will be passed all the way to the fourth generation.
So that's why great grandchildren.
Exactly. Wow. Great grandchild. Yeah. And so that's why it's important to maintain the health of the current woman.
Yeah.
Because her health will contribute to more generations of children that come after her.
And what she should be doing differently in terms of her reproductive health.
Exactly. So now it's just not even about reproductive health care. it's also about holistic health.
Oh, wow.
And holistic health is mental health, spiritual health, physical health. And one of the things that plays a very important role, and people really underestimate it, is nutrition. So nutrition is number one.
Yeah. The foods we're eating.
Yes, nutrition is number one, and nutrition plays important role in the physical health, but more importantly in reproductive health. So you need to have good nutrition, and that's why we should campaign for all our women, our mothers, to make sure that they have access to good nutrition wherever they are. Okay, that's number one. Number two, so that access to health is very important, and just access to health, because when women have infections, they need to be treated for those infections and so forth. Then, of course, having the right sexual habits that will ensure that the vagina remains healthy and the other reproductive health structures are also healthy. It's a very important thing. There's some, public education things that people need to know, like douching, getting to clean within the vagina and putting some chemicals in the vagina. Those are not good practices. They're bad practices that alter the vaginal environment and ensure bad health in this system. So, just having an array of approach that these women can eat healthy diets and are accessible to good nutrition. When they're not feeling well, they can access good health care, call it universal health care. And most important about universal health care is that's not the access to care, but quality of care plays a very important role. Activities that
Moses, there's something we've been wondering about. If for COVID vaccine, right?
Yes.
That was generated very quickly.
Yes.
But HIV vaccine seems to be very elusive. Why? Is it scientists being lazy or not applying
Well,
themselves?
I think it's the mechanism and the technologies that have been used to develop these vaccines in the past. And right now, I think this technology of using RNA vaccination RNA is one of the proteins that are produced by the cells, and these proteins are produced by the signature for proteins that are produced by the cells. And now the scientists over time, they've been developing this technology, and that's the technology they used to develop the COVID vaccine. And that's how it came up quite fast, because the technology had been in the works for a long time, but it never been tried on any disease process. But they tried it on COVID, and it seems to be working very well. I'm aware that the same technology is being used to see if they can also develop the same kind of vaccine for HIV using the same technology. But this is work in progress. So I think scientists every day are putting in some great work to make sure that good vaccines are found, not only for HIV, AIDS, but also for malaria, tuberculosis, and other diseases.
Yeah.
Yes. So in the initial work, they came across women who had been exposed to men and having unprotected sex. And these women somehow were not acquiring HIV. And they were recruited in studies and showed that they had some antibodies that were developing against HIV, and they wanted to use this information to see whether they could develop what we call antibody-based vaccines. And this has been one of the trials that have been going on at the Kenya AIDS Vaccine Initiative, supported by the International AIDS Vaccine Initiative, IAVI. And this research has been going on, you can imagine, all the way from early 2000 up to date. So far, we haven't had, any results that show that we are really near getting the vaccine from this kind of operations. I know there are many other approaches that are taking place, including research within the vaginal environment itself to see what are immune cells that can lead to protection. But that did not go all the way up. So there's some more research that's going on, meaning that one should not be assumptuous and say that the more they're exposed to the, HIV, the more immunity they get. That's a fallacy. It's not correct, and people should continue protecting themselves against acquiring HIV virus through sexual intercourse and other activities. There has been a lot of controversy about the female sex workers working in Majengo, from Majengo area in Nairobi, and their developed immunity, especially against HIV. So I need to shed light about this on this concept and the controversies that exist thereof. When I was a medical student, I was also one of the research assistants and a trainee under very eminent professors, the late Professor Bwayo, the late Professor Ochola, and Professor Nzala and Professor Jaoko. They are people who lead research on HIV, AIDS, and vaccine development at Kenya AIDS Vaccine Initiative.
Which African scientist do you think is doing some amazing work? Who are they? What are they doing? And in what field?
Jimde, who is also one of my colleagues at the Callistos Juma Fellowship, is based at University of Bamako in Mali. And he's doing some great work, very consequential and influential work in malaria, trying to change how we approach malaria as an epidemic, as a problem that's facing the African people. And he's giving us a lot of hope. And his demeanor is of that calm scientist who is in control and he knows what he's doing.
Let's talk a little bit about you. Yeah. You know, during our research, we uncovered something very fascinating.
Yes.
That not only you're a medical doctor and a researcher and a hardcore scientist in the field of reproductive health, looking at women issues.
Sure.
You're also very passionate about shairis.
Yes.
These are African poems from East Africa. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm a lover of poetry and mashairi in English and Swahili. And for a very long time, since the time I was in primary school in the village, all the way to high school and university. Initially, in fact, I thought I'd become a poet. I used to call myself Mwana Genzi wa ushairi. Mwana Genzi means mwanafunzi, a learner.
So it's like a student.
Yes, a student of poetry. And there are quite a number of poets from especially Kisiwa cha Zanzibar, Kisiwa cha Pemba, who've written various educational mashairi. Abdul Latif is a Kenyan who migrated to Tanzania, wrote a very good collection of poems called Sauti ya Dhiki, about a little bit about politics and poetry and just anchoring politics in real language.
If you're not a scientist, what other career would you be doing?
I'd probably be a poet.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, so I'd probably be a poet.
Yeah.
And had I not been lucky enough to go through school, then I probably have been a carpenter, but a very good one for that matter, because I believe in excellence in whatever you are doing. So it could be a poet or a carpenter or a musician, Yeah.
Do you find that there's a connection between literature, poetry, to now the work that you do when it comes to reproductive health?
Sure, yes. There is quite a strong connection because the work that I'm doing is trying to understand us as Africans and our African uniqueness. And therefore it means we also have our unique approach to the problems that we face as African people. And these problems can only be solved by us, the Africans, of course, with the support from the rest of the world. So that what you call Afrocentric kind of approach from the poems and the mashairis I really read. And I also say I've written a few mashairis myself, not published, but they're present. Focuses much more on what we can do as the African people, looking at our own problems, adopting the technologies that are around the world, and how then we solve these problems for our people, especially when it comes to reproductive health.
So, who do you identify with most in the music world, and what aspects of their work resonate with you?
Yes, so there are two. One I'll mention because they compare. One is an old musician, he's called Johann Strauss. Two. And the second one is called Yo-Yo Ma.
Okay.
They play classical music, which I spend in my free time, and I'm not doing anything. 80% I'll be listening to these people.
What countries were they from?
So they do. Johann Strauss is from Austria, Europe, and they do fantastic classical music. And there's a lot of. I feel that my hair grows from all over my body when I get to listen to their music and their performance.
At this point in time, we will listen to some music from Johann Strauss.
Johann Strauss. Yes.
Yeah. So as we conclude, what do we have to look forward to?
Yeah, so as we conclude, I think there's a lot of hope in medicine, and I've been telling my students that currently we know that most doctors who qualify from the universities do not get employment with the government. But I was telling them that's not a problem, because we have the brains to innovate, brains to think out of box, and brains to create new opportunities, not only for ourselves, but for others. So I think, first of all, we will need to get opportunities for all our doctors in private and government institutions to be able to practice what they've trained for. Besides that, we also need to create new opportunities in research, innovation, and be able to create employment opportunity not only for healthcare practitioners, but also for other people in the community to participate in ensuring a healthy generation of people that are coming ahead of us.
As a scientist, what daily habit do you think regular people should adopt, that is often overlooked or ignored?
Exercises is something that sometimes we say we don't have time for exercise. We need to take care of our bodies in terms of self-care. So exercises, participate in good nutrition, and engage socially, and of course inspire those who wish to be like us in our communities.
Moses, as we wrap up, and thank you so much for a wonderful interview, just delving into the world of research, the journey that has brought you, to become this amazing scientific leader that we can look up to.
Sure.
And just in terms of the future, it sounds like there's some fantastic innovations coming from the University of Nairobi and the funding that you're receiving.
Absolutely.
I'm kind of interested to know what fascinates you and what scares you at the same time.
So fascination is that we have very intelligent people around us doing extremely intelligent work, especially from Kenya, Nairobi, and the University of Nairobi. So I talk to the students. You can see the future is bright, and they organize themselves to do great stuff from the medical school perspective. And I think this will really be influential. What scares me a lot right now is the social inequities that I feel children from poor backgrounds could easily be disadvantaged in terms of access to education, access to healthcare, and access to any other facility that they really need to access. So that's really my number one concern, because we have to have equity for us to be able to create the next generation of people. And then number two is the social media that's uncontrolled and political extremism, because now there's a lot of, you would expect people to be sensible, but sometimes people take positions that are really extreme, which I think sometimes not very good. It's always good to find what's common amongst us and what can we solve as common as people, instead of really having hardened position on extreme sides. And sometimes social media, if not well used, gets these positions really hardened and extreme. And that's really my worry, that we have to have good regulations and regulatory frameworks that can put people in check, so that we use these tools that are for good, for the better of the human and the human societies.
So as a researcher, scientist who delves into tech and artificial intelligence for healthcare, between AI and social media, which one concerns you the most and why?
So I think they are siblings, and both of them need regulation. AI needs regulation, because if anyone stood up today and they were to do anything they like through the AI, will be doomed. So very tough, not really tough, but concise regulatory frameworks are needed for AI applications, and also for social media use. We have freedom of speech is okay, but let's use this speech to further human interests, to make our societies and communities better places to live.
thank you. On that note, I really want to thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And imparting the knowledge that you have. Wishing you all the best and good luck in all the work that you do.
Thank you so much, Juliette. It was a pleasure being hosted by you.
That is the voice of Professor Moses Madadi, clinician, doctor, and scientist, and professor at the University of Nairobi. Moses is really focusing on women's health and delving into technology in terms of getting cures to be able to address issues around healthy reproductive systems and safety deliveries of healthy babies. Connecting the Dots is recorded and produced by Teamwork at AMP Studios in Nairobi, Kenya. Join me, Juliette, as I interview the next amazing African scientist on the next episode of Connecting the Dots podcast. It is available on your favorite podcast app on Apple or Android. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and tell a friend or enemy about us.